I never thought I'd be the type of person to snoop through my husband's credit card statements. Yet here I was, sitting at our kitchen island at midnight, staring at a charge from the Riverside Hotel that made my stomach twist into knots. My name is Ellie, and until tonight, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. Software developer, working from home, married to Jake, my college sweetheart who somehow still made my heart skip after 10 years together. At least, that's what I thought until I saw that receipt. I'd only been looking through the statements because Jake mentioned some fraudulent charges last week. Just keep an eye out for anything weird, he'd said, kissing my forehead before heading to another late meeting. Now I couldn't help but wonder if he'd wanted me to find this, some subconscious cry for help or confession. The charge wasn't even that much, $189 for a Tuesday night 2 weeks ago. But Jake was supposed to be in Chicago that day for work. I remembered because we'd video chatted that evening, and I could see the familiar skyline through his hotel window. My hands shook as I pulled up his location history on our shared phone plan. The map showed him downtown. All right, just not in Chicago. He'd been right here in town, less than 3 miles from our house. The front door clicked open, making me jump. I quickly switched tabs to a work email as Jake walked in, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder. "Hey babe, you're up late," he said, loosening his tie. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just finishing up some code reviews." "How was your meeting?" "Brutal." Thompson wouldn't stop talking about his new boat. Jake grabbed a water bottle from the fridge. "You coming to bed soon?" "In a minute," I said, watching him head upstairs. My eyes drifted back to the credit card statement glowing on my screen. I thought about calling my best friend Nora for advice, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she'd been distant lately, always too busy to grab coffee or return my texts. Or maybe it was because the last time I saw her, she'd been wearing a new perfume, the same scent that sometimes clung to Jake's shirts when he came home late. I closed my laptop, feeling sick. Tomorrow I'd start digging deeper, but tonight I needed to think. One thing was certain, either I was becoming paranoid, or the two people I trusted most in the world were hiding something from me. And I was going to find out which. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, so I called Lily, Jake's sister and probably the most honest person I know. We met at a quiet coffee shop across town, far from anywhere Jake or Nora might show up. "You're not being paranoid," Lily said, stirring her latte. "Jake's been different lately. More secretive." She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "Last week, I saw him downtown when he was supposed to be at work. He was coming out of a jewelry store." My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "Nora's birthday is next month." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Ellie, I know what you're thinking," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But maybe there's an explanation." "Maybe." "Stop." Lily reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Remember when we were kids, and Jake convinced me to cover for him when he crashed Dad's car? He has this way of making everything seem fine, even when it's not. It's what he does." She was right. It was one of the things that had first attracted me to Jake, his ability to smooth over any situation, to make everyone feel at ease. Now I wondered if that charm had been hiding something darker all along. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Dinner with clients tonight. Don't wait up." I showed it to Lily, who frowned. "Want me to drive by his office later?" "No," I said, an idea forming. "But I could use your help with something else." That evening, I sat in Lily's car outside the restaurant where Jake claimed to be having his client dinner. We watched as he pulled into the parking lot, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, and straightened his tie. "Maybe he really does have clients," Lily whispered. Then another car pulled in, Nora's silver BMW. She stepped out wearing a red dress I'd helped her pick out last month. Jake walked over, and they embraced for a moment longer than friends should. "I'm so sorry," Lily said softly. I felt oddly calm, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life falling apart. "Don't be. At least now I know." They disappeared into the restaurant, and I turned to Lily. "I need one more favor. Can you have dinner with Max tomorrow? Keep him busy for a few hours." "Why? What are you going to do?" I started the car, my mind already racing ahead to the next step. "I'm going to find out exactly what else they've been hiding. And then I'm going to make sure they never forget what it feels like to have their whole world turned upside down." Lily studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Whatever you need." Just be careful, okay? Sometimes when people get caught, they do desperate things. I didn't tell her that I was counting on exactly that. Being a software developer has its perks, especially when you need to track someone's location without them knowing. I'd written enough code in my life to know that every digital move leaves a trace. Jake's phone was no exception. While he slept, I installed a tracking app on his device, disguised as a system update. By morning, I had a map of everywhere he'd been in the past month. The pattern was clear. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, his location showed him at a remote cabin near Lake Morrison, about 40 minutes outside the city. Today was Thursday. I told Jake I had a migraine and needed to sleep it off. He kissed my forehead, the gesture making my skin crawl, and left for work. I waited 30 minutes before following in my car, keeping a safe distance. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road, hidden behind pine trees. I parked behind a thick cluster of bushes and killed the engine. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone to record, but my heart hammered against my ribs. Nora's BMW pulled up 15 minutes later. She checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, a habit I'd seen her do 1,000 times before our coffee dates. The familiarity of it made me want to scream. Jake appeared on the cabin's porch, wearing jeans and a casual sweater, not his usual work attire. They embraced, and I forced myself to keep watching, to document everything. Then Nora pulled something from her purse, a small, wrapped package. Through my zoom lens, I could see Jake's face light up as he opened it. A watch. The same one I'd been saving to buy him for our anniversary next month. My phone slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, clattering against the dashboard. The noise must have carried because both Jake and Nora froze, looking toward the trees. I ducked down, heart pounding. When I dared to look again, they had disappeared inside the cabin. But not before I saw something that made my blood run cold. Jake was carrying a small duffel bag, the kind you'd pack for a weekend getaway. My phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Max is asking questions about where Nora goes on Thursdays. Says the school called, she's been skipping her volunteer hours in the library. Another buzz. This time from Jake, working late again. Don't wait up. I started my car, my mind racing ahead to what needed to be done. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning something bigger. Maybe running away together. The thought of them laughing at me, planning their escape while playing happy families, made something snap inside me. I'd given them enough rope. Now it was time to watch them hang themselves with it. I hadn't planned on telling Max. Not yet anyway. But life has a way of forcing your hand when you least expect it. He showed up at my door Saturday morning, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Can we talk? He asked, his usually cheerful face drawn with worry. It's about Nora. We sat in my kitchen, the same spot where I discovered Jake's hotel receipt just days ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. She's been acting strange, Max said, turning his coffee mug in circles. Missing work, taking calls in other rooms. Last night I found this. He slid an envelope across the table. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were printouts of flight confirmations, 2 tickets to Vancouver, departing next week. One way. I thought maybe you'd know something, Max said quietly. You're her best friend. The word friend hit me like a slap. I stared at the tickets, dated for exactly 1 day after Jake's supposed business trip to Seattle. Max, I started, but my voice cracked. How do you tell someone their whole life is about to implode? He must have read something in my expression because he suddenly went very still. You do know something. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake, taking Nora to lunch to discuss the Thompson account. Back later. I slid my phone across the table. Max read the message, his face draining of color. Thompson account, he whispered. Nora doesn't work in finance. No, I said softly. She doesn't. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then Max did something unexpected. He laughed. A hollow, broken sound that made my chest ache. You know what's funny, he said, running a hand through his hair. I bought her tickets to Paris for our anniversary next month. She always wanted to see Paris. He pulled out his wallet and dropped 2 more tickets on the table. Guess Vancouver with Jake seemed like a better option. I reached for his hand, but he stood up abruptly. We have to stop them. Max. No, listen. We can't let them just. He paced the kitchen, his teacher's composure cracking. They're planning to abandon us, Ellie. To start over like we never existed. Are you really going to sit here and let them? I looked at the flight confirmations again, thinking about the cabin, the watch, all the lies. No, I said finally. I'm not. Max nodded, a dangerous glint in his usually gentle eyes. So what's the plan? I pulled out my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. First, we're going to make sure their little escape plan falls apart. Then, I met his gaze. Then we're going to make them wish they'd never met each other. I hadn't visited my father's house since Mom died 2 years ago, but I needed his perspective. Dad opened the door before I could knock, still in his firefighter mindset. Always alert, always ready. You look like hell, kiddo, he said, pulling me into a hug. We sat on his back porch, the same spot where he'd taught me chess as a kid. Sometimes, he'd say, you have to sacrifice a piece to win the game. I was starting to understand what he meant. Jake and Nora are planning to leave the country, I said, watching his reaction. Together. Dad's hands tightened around his coffee mug. And you're sure about this? I showed him the flight confirmations, the cabin photos, everything. He studied them with the same methodical focus he'd used when investigating fire scenes. Max wants revenge, I said. He has this idea about exposing them at the charity gala next week, making a scene in front of everyone they know. And what do you want? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? The old Ellie would have wanted peace, closure, a quiet divorce. But the old Ellie died the moment she saw her husband kiss her best friend. My phone buzzed, a text from Max. Found something in Nora's email. Call me ASAP. Before I could respond, another message came through, this time from Lily. Jake just withdrew $50K from your joint account. Something's wrong. Dad must have seen something change in my face. Remember what I taught you about backdrafts? He said quietly. How the most dangerous moment isn't when you first see the fire, but when you open the door and give it oxygen. I nodded, my throat tight. Well, revenge is like that. Once you open that door, you can't control how hot it burns or who gets hurt. They're already hurting people, I said. They're already burning everything down. Then maybe, Dad said, standing up, the solution isn't to add more fuel to the fire. Maybe it's time to be the firefighter, not the arsonist. My phone buzzed again. Max had sent a screenshot, an email thread between Jake and Nora discussing not just their escape, but their plans to transfer company funds before they left. They weren't just running away. They were planning to steal from Jake's firm. I have to go, I said, already heading for the door. Ellie. Dad's voice stopped me. Whatever you're planning, just remember who you are. You're not them. I turned back, seeing the worry in his eyes. No, I agreed. I'm not. I'm smarter. The door closed behind me with a final click, like a chess piece being set into position. Check and mate were coming, but not the way anyone expected. The cabin looked different in the rain. Smaller somehow. Less like a romantic getaway, and more like what it really was, a monument to betrayal. I sat in my car, watching Jake's Range Rover pull up, followed minutes later by Nora's BMW. Right on schedule. Max shifted in the passenger seat. You sure about this? I nodded, gripping the manila envelope containing everything. The bank transfers, the flight confirmations, the photos. Lily's already called the firm's ethics committee. They'll be here in 20 minutes. We waited until Jake and Nora were inside before approaching. Through the window, I could see them embracing, comfortable in what they thought was their secret world. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. It wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. They never expected anyone to find them here. The look on their faces when we walked in, I thought it would feel satisfying. Instead, it just made me tired. Jake recovered first, his charm clicking into place like armor. Ellie, I can't explain. The money. I cut him off. Or the affair. Or maybe the plans to disappear to Vancouver next week. Nora's face went white. Max? What are you? Don't. Max's voice cracked. Just don't. I tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. The firm's ethics committee is on their way. They're very interested in those unauthorized transfers you've been making, Jake. Jake's charm vanished. You wouldn't. Actually, I already did. About 10 minutes ago. That's when everything went sideways. Jake lunged for the envelope, knocking over a lamp. In the chaos, Nora grabbed her phone, frantically trying to call someone. Max moved to stop her, but Jake shoved him hard against the wall. I hadn't expected violence. Hadn't expected Jake to look at me with such hatred as he grabbed my arm, trying to wrestle the evidence away. "Let go," I shouted, but his grip tightened. Then Nora screamed. Through the window, we could see police lights approaching, but they weren't from the ethics committee. "I called them," Nora said, her voice shaking. "When I saw you pull up, I thought you were going to hurt us." Jake released me, backing away. "You don't understand," he said, but he wasn't talking to me anymore. He was talking to Nora. The transfers weren't just for us. There are other people involved. People who won't. The door burst open. Everything happened fast after that. Shouting, handcuffs, questions I couldn't answer. As they led Jake away, I caught a glimpse of his face. For the first time, I saw real fear there. What had I done? What had I really stumbled into? The rain kept falling, washing away everything I thought I knew about revenge, about justice, about the man I'd married. And somewhere in the distance, I heard sirens getting closer. The police station interview room felt smaller with each passing hour. Jake sat across from me, his suit wrinkled, his charm replaced by something darker. Between us lay a stack of financial documents that told a story far worse than a simple affair. "You really want to know why?" Jake's voice was hollow. "Because I was drowning. The firm was investigating irregularities, and Nora, she had connections. People who could help make problems disappear. In exchange for what? Money laundering. Through my corporate accounts." He laughed bitterly. "She wasn't just my affair, Ellie. She was my handler." The door opened. Nora walked in, escorted by 2 detectives. She looked different now, sharper, more focused. The bubbly best friend act had vanished completely. "Tell her," Jake said. "Tell her what this really was." Nora sat down, her handcuffs clinking against the table. "It wasn't personal, Ellie. Jake was an easy mark. Ambitious, frustrated, desperate to prove himself. Men like that are perfect for what we needed. And Max." My voice cracked. "Was he just collateral damage?" "Max was my cover." Sweet, trusting Max. Her expression softened for a moment, then hardened again. "But you had to play detective, didn't you? Couldn't just let things be. Like you let things be when you seduced my husband? When you used our friendship to what?" Nora leaned forward. "To survive? You have no idea what it's like to be trapped, Ellie. To feel like your whole life is a cage." Jake understood that. He wanted out as much as I did. "I wanted out of the financial hole I was in," Jake interrupted. "I never wanted this." A detective entered with more files. "Mrs. Marlowe, we'll need your statement about the transfers you discovered. The FBI is particularly interested in." "FBI?" Jake went pale. "You called the FBI?" "No," I said quietly. "Dad did. The moment I showed him the pattern of transfers. Turns out his old firefighting buddy works white-collar crimes now." Nora's composure cracked. "You stupid little. Save it." I stood up, suddenly tired of their voices, their excuses, their attempts to justify destroying 4 lives. "You know what's funny? I came here wanting revenge. But watching you 2 tear each other apart, that's better than anything I could have planned." I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "By the way, Nora, those connections you were so proud of, they rolled on you an hour ago. Turns out nobody's loyal when the FBI starts asking questions." The look on their faces as I left, that moment when they realized they destroyed themselves more thoroughly than I ever could, that wasn't satisfaction. It was something else. Something that felt a lot like freedom. 6 months later, I stood in front of the cabin again. The for sale sign swayed in the autumn breeze. It sold, sticker fresh and red. Max stood beside me, hands in his pockets. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded, turning the key in the lock. The cabin looked different now. Empty, ordinary, just wooden windows. Amazing how something could lose its power over you. "Jake's sentencing is next week," Max said, helping me carry in boxes of cleaning supplies. "Nora took a plea deal. 5 years, maybe less with good behavior." "And how do you feel about that?" He paused, considering. "Honestly, nothing. That's the weird part. I don't feel anything anymore." I understood exactly what he meant. The rage, the betrayal, the desperate need for revenge. It had all burned itself out, leaving something quieter behind. Something stronger. We worked in comfortable silence, prepping the cabin for its new life as a weekend rental property. Our shared investment, funded by the divorce settlements. Turning poison into profit. It felt right somehow. My phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Dad wants to know if you're still coming for dinner. Says he's making his famous lasagna. I smiled, remembering our conversation on his porch, how he'd warned me about backdrafts and revenge. He'd been right, but not in the way he'd expected. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying something, but about building something new from the ashes. Found something, Max called from the bedroom. He held up a small box. Nora's jewelry box, forgotten in the chaos. Inside was the watch she'd given Jake, still in its wrapping. Keep it, I said. Sell it. Donate it. Whatever feels right. He studied the watch for a moment, then tossed it in the donation box. You know what's funny? A year ago, I thought I had everything figured out. Perfect wife, perfect life. And now I know better. But I'm okay with that. We finished cleaning as the sun set, casting long shadows through the windows. Tomorrow, the first guests would arrive, a young couple celebrating their honeymoon. They'd have no idea about the cabin's history, the secrets it had held, the lives it had changed. Ready to go? Max asked, holding the door. I took one last look around. In the fading light, I could almost see echoes of that rainy night. The confrontation, the revelations, the moment everything changed. But those ghosts had no power here anymore. Yeah, I said, locking up. I'm ready. We walked to our cars, leaving the cabin behind. Ahead of us, the city lights were coming on, one by one, like stars emerging after a storm. Not an ending exactly. More like a different kind of beginning.